I was doing some Christmas shopping in a Walmart recently, getting some stuff for my nieces and nephews. I'm their favourite auntie because I always spoil them at Christmas and birthdays, and a lot of the rest of the time too, to be honest. It was a pretty big Walmart, shelves piled high for Christmas as always, and I was in a bit of a dark area near a storeroom entrance, looking at some items for the kids. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this guy, who I took to be a security guard, came up behind me and said, pretty aggressively, "Excuse me, miss, you'll need to come with me." I turned around very startled to see a tall and thin, sort of creepy looking guy leaning towards me. He was wearing some sort of stab vest with a badge on it, a radio, and an earpiece, and I could see a taser at his side. "Who the heck are you?" I said, pretty indignant. He leaned even further forward towards me, and in a low growl said, "We have reason to believe you've been shoplifting, so come with me." I said, "I haven't been shoplifting and you know it, so fuck off." I went to walk away and he grabbed my arm. I told him to let go of me or I'd scream for help. Just then a young Walmart associate came out of the storeroom and did a double take when he saw the scene in front of him. "Can you please help me?" I said instantly. "This creep's trying to assault me." The young guy was confused and just said, "What?" And before anything else could happen, the creep said, "I've had a message to go back to the security office. Just keep an eye on her, okay?" And with that he disappeared as quickly as he'd appeared. I said to the associate, "Are you guys really employing goons like that?" He said he'd never seen this guy before and didn't know if he even worked there. I was pretty disturbed by that comment. After I checked out and went into the car park, who should I see standing there in the parking lot but this creep? He was standing amongst cars across the crosswalk in the car park, leering towards the shoppers coming out. I noticed a police car pulled up a little ways along from the front entrance. I don't know if they were there for a real shoplifter or just having some donuts or whatever, but I walked over and knocked on the window. They asked what the problem was, and when I explained and pointed towards where the creep was standing, he noticed us looking in his direction. He immediately ran towards a parked car somewhere, and an engine roared before I saw the car bolting out of that mall car park. The cops took a statement from me, and it was referred to detectives, who said they would use the car park CCTV to get this guy's license plate. I tell this story to make sure that everyone remembers to always identify people who say they are security guards or cops or whatever. There are creeps out there who want to do God knows what to people under the guise of being law enforcement. Just make sure and check who they really are. Christmas isn't really my thing. I live in a different country from my remaining family members, and I don't care for the Christmas spirit much either. I still take the opportunity of having a great big feast and eating far too much chocolate. Sometimes I'll see friends, but Christmas Day alone is for me a blessed relief. Time on my own with no one to bother me, and the society I have little time for temporarily stops. I was sitting in my living room on Christmas Eve. It had just got dark, so it was maybe around 5 p.m. I rent a house outside the town where I work. There's some houses near it, but I don't really have any neighbours as such. So I was pretty surprised when there was a knock on my door, just as I was thinking, what am I going to have for dinner? I have a doorbell cam, so I went into the hallway and looked to see who was outside. The distorted face of someone in a Santa suit with a fake beard was disturbingly close to the camera. I said, "Who are you?" "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas," came a strange voice from the other side. "I'm collecting for sick and underprivileged kiddies. Open your heart and open your door." Collecting? Collecting for who? "Sick kids, I said so," came back the voice, slightly irritatedly. This angered me, so I said, "You know what, pal? Get going. You're just a shyster." "Okay, fine," came the angry response. The figure then stormed back down the driveway and into the darkness. I thought nothing more about it from there. I nodded off in front of the TV, waking up pretty late in the night. I got up and started switching off everything in preparation for going to bed. So all the lights were out when there was a sudden banging on the back door. Very loud banging, aggressive, not knocking. I went to the threshold of the kitchen and looked out. I could clearly see the figure banging on the back door, and because the room was in darkness, they couldn't see me. It was a middle-aged, bearded, straggly-haired guy with a big pot belly. The figure then yelled out, "Open the door!" And I realised it was the same voice as the goon in the Santa suit hours earlier. Now, I don't have a ton of faith in the police, so for something like this, I prefer to handle it myself. I kept a baseball bat in the living room for self-defence. Picking it up, I headed towards the side door of the house that opened out into a narrow path leading to the backyard. I charged round to the back door and let out a battle cry. The pot-bellied guy turned round with a look of surprise and horror on his face and shouted, "Please, don't hurt me." I shouted, "Get the fuck out of here and don't ever come back or you will get hurt." The pot-bellied guy ran out of the yard, probably faster than he had run in years. I went inside and once the adrenaline had died down, slept like a baby, safe in the knowledge that there'd be no further interruptions that night or any other night. I decided to have Christmas in Florida this year. I live in a state that has a real winter, so the idea of 20-something degrees in December certainly seemed like a good one. I just started to slip into that slight depression that the darkness and poor weather gives a lot of people. Seasonal affective disorder, I think they call it. Having got a decent deal on the hotel, I was all set. Even the 3-hour flight down went better than I could have expected, so I arrived in sunny Florida full of beans. It was great to have all that sun and decent weather while other people were shivering around the Christmas tree. I did the usual kind of things you do in Florida. Laid around on beaches, took a boat trip, saw some sights. I almost forgot about Christmas and only remembered when I saw in the hotel that the restaurant was advertising a Christmas dinner. All was great until the night before I went home. I was heading back on the 27th, so by Boxing Day I had started to get a bit depressed at the thought of going back to the winter. I returned to my room on Boxing Day evening and began girding my loins for the flight the following afternoon. I'm not sure when I fell asleep, but it was fitful. In the middle of the night, I became aware of a strange buzzing sound. I was lying on my side and the noise was coming from behind me. Rolling over, I was confronted by a terrifying sight. A huge skeletal figure loomed over me, growling horribly at me. Instinctively, I started screaming, but even more horribly, no sound seemed to emerge from my mouth, no matter how hard I tried. I also tried lashing out at the figure above me, but my feet seemed to hit some sort of strange force field that protected it. Yet somehow, the ghoul seemed to move ever closer to me. I struggled and tried to scream even more, but without success. At the peak of my terror, there was a loud knock on the hotel room door. The ghoulish spectre suddenly disappeared, and the room was plunged back into darkness. I let out a strangled cry and, from the other side of the door, heard a voice say, "Sir, it's hotel security. Is everything okay in there?" I realised I was drenched in sweat, my mouth dry as a bone. I also felt a sudden embarrassment and went sheepishly to the hotel room door. I apologised to the security guard after I'd been told there were some calls from nearby rooms saying that I'd been screaming and carrying on. I said I guess I was just having a really bad dream and I would make sure it didn't happen again. It was already about 4 o'clock in the morning, so I proposed to just stay awake until it was light again. As the days went on, I thought about what happened. I'd heard about night terrors and sleepwalking and all that kind of stuff. That it was a delusion between wake and sleep, where the brain plays tricks. However, I was still almost cold sweating every time I thought about the horrifying figure from hell growling above me. It was unbelievably real and convincing. It had definitely got inside my head, and I couldn't be sure it wasn't real. Eventually, I settled on the belief that it was a night terror, because I didn't want to think about the other possibility anymore. It was just too terrifying.